What was the major difficulty you encountered when planning the TPS, and how did you circumvent this difficulty?
So in my case, this was how to find person that can help me with that since for such kind of work a certain expertise is needed. So personnel in our lab with that required expertise is limited and occupied with several activities. We were lucky to find one who learned quickly, but anyway, teaching someone takes enormous time.
I would say that the biggest difficulty were time constraints at the beginning of the project. We organized 2 TPS studies at the very beginning, having to send material out in March. And at the beginning, there was considerable overlap of our preparation process with the harmonization among the different TPS organizers. It was very useful. It improved our work a lot. But I would say that it's not for the faint-hearted. It resulted in good quality and useful results, but it can be a bit stressful.
As we started the VALITEST project in June, the main difficulty was to estimate the needs, to collect and prepare the plant material in the best conditions, and to organize the storage for later use in autumn and winter.
So the major difficulty we had within our organization was that we had some personnel changes during the organization of the TPS. And the problem is we didn't really have any redundancy set up. So we just had some people leading the project and then going away. So it was quite difficult to get into the project because we didn't have one person leading it.
Sometimes it was not so easy to retrieve from the companies, commercial companies, the same material or the same buffer, but at the end we managed it. At the end we managed. And the reason is not because they were not available, but because working at the university, we have some special procedures for purchasing. So we had to, to work it around and prepare documents to show that we needed certain reagents that were necessary for a particular experiment, and to justify our request to be able to purchase from the companies that had what we needed. So that was, I would say, the main issue.
Tomato brown rugose fruit virus is an emerging virus. We were aware of specific biological features of the virus regarding the transmission by contact, the high longevity, and the high concentration of brown rugose in leaves and fruit. All this imposed procedures of high attention in handling the materials due to the high risk of contamination during virus multiplication, of course performed in quarantine conditions, and manipulation for sample panel arrangement. At the same time, few information was available. The main difficulty in organizing the TPS for brown rugose was in preliminary activities regarding the availability of target and not target isolates, the gathering information and validation data from the main database in order to identify the most suitable test that could be evaluated.
The biggest difficulty was to participate in the construction of the documentation to harmonize the different TPS and at the same time to carry out the technical part, selecting the test, carrying the preliminary test, building the TPS, writing its documentation before preparing and validating the samples.
I think the biggest difficulty we had for the Fusarium circinatum TPS was that we struggled to get cultures that were verified and also could be distributed in a TPS. So some culture collections wouldn't let you distribute cultures in a test performance study. So that was our first challenge.
What document did you use to cover all aspects of a TPS plan?
My main checklist, if I may say so, were two EPO standards. These were PM7122, and so this is about the guidelines for the organization of interrogatory comparisons. And also I use PM798. This is the guidelines about the specific requirements. And of course, I used also the knowledge from the first round of TPS done in the frame of VALITEST.
In fact, in ANSES laboratories, we are used to organize interlaboratory proficiency tests, some of them under the cover of our accreditation. And even if there are important differences in terms of organization between a proficiency test and a TPS, the fact that we are used to organize a proficiency test was very helpful, and we only have to adapt our documentation to the specific case of TPS, but we already had a solid basis.
The checklist is essential. We have also made a retro planning from the planned sending date of panel in order to fix the schedule of action to be carried out. And we often made a point to check the progress and to make sure we hadn't forgotten anything.
Yes, we had a Gantt chart and we had several checklists for different aspects of the planning. So we had checklists for progressing methods through the laboratory, as well as checklists when we were coming to dispatching samples. That was the most complex part, I think, for requiring additional checking. We had some participants didn't do all of the tests, and there were different types of samples for different methods. So we had to keep track of exactly which participant needed which types of samples, and also ensure that they got the correct set of paperwork. Everything was checked by at least 2 people as well.
According to your experience, did you identify specific items that should be included in the preparation of the TPS plan and that were lacking or could have been improved?
We have had a very detailed plan. What we had to do is, of course, collect plant material well in advance because of the seasonality of our samples. So although we were sending samples in March, we had to, of course, collect the material the previous season. Of course, this is something that you cannot really, you don't have much maneuvering space within a project that is very tightly packed. But if we had to do it again, we would probably extend the preparation of the TPS across a longer period for this reason.
I would advise to at least, for example, if you are organizing a TPS, to have at least 2 people working on it and being aware of what is going on. So build in some redundancy. So when someone leaves for whatever reason, you can continue without any difficulty.
I would say that each laboratory really has to prepare its own checklist, because each situation may have different conditions that need attention.
The detail on the composition of sample panel should be improved in the way that inclusion or exclusion of a specific sample can affect the evaluation of performance. So every sample that must be included should be carefully think before preparing the TPS.
As already said, the most important thing for me is to put in relation objectives of the TPS, appropriate choice of the samples, and data analysis. All this before the beginning of the TPS.